Hello, everyone. We are at 1:55, so I think we should get started for the session. This is Yong Zhu. I am from General Mills. I will be the moderator for the session, Influence of Consumer Behavior on Nutrition Research. And we are honored to have four speakers for the session today. Birdem Amoutzopolos from the UK National Institute for Health Research. The title of her presentation is Evaluation of Rationalization of UK Nutrient Databank to enable the UK NDNS to move to a web-based 24-hour record. Donna Rhodes from USDA presenting on FNDDS 2019-2020, an application for database for national dietary surveillance. We also have Andrea Carlson from USDA. The title of her presentation is Measuring Added Sugar Patches and Habit 2013 to 2018 using retail and household-based food scanner data for nutrition monitoring. And our last speaker for the session is Lisa Harnack from the University of Minnesota. She will be presenting an approach to enhancing a food and nutrient database to include food unique to Jamaican, Haitian, Nigerian, and Somali cooking traditions in the US. With that, I will turn it over to MS for the presentations.
I am Birdem Amoutzopolos, a nutrition researcher working at the University of Cambridge. I am going to talk about the evaluation of the rationalization of the UK Nutrient Databank to enable the UK National Diet and Nutrition Survey, which is called NDNS, to move to a web-based 24-hour recall called Intake24. In the UK, the NDNS is a continuous cross-sectional survey, and it is designed to collect dietary intake data information of the free-living UK population aged 1.5 years and over, living in private households. The survey covers a UK representative sample of approximately 1,000 people per year. The survey began in 2008, and it's now in its 15th year. In 2019, the dietary assessment method in UK NDNS moved from a paper-based diary to a web-based 24-hour recall, which is called Intake24, and this was in response to methodological advances and the drive for cost-effectiveness. Intake24 was initially developed by the University of Newcastle and has been then adapted and customized by the University of Cambridge in collaboration with Newcastle, who is the technical founder. It has also been developed internationally. For example, we have recently adapted it to the South Asian settings, but that is a different story. The UK NDNS has been underpinned by the UK Nutrient Databank, which is annually updated by us and UK Government Health Department. A major advantage of Intake24 is that it already contained this databank, and the implementation of Intake24 into NDNS provided an opportunity to review, clean, and update the nutrient databank so that it was fit for purpose and could be more efficiently managed in the coming years of NDNS. So our aim was to move from an extensive nutrient databank with around 6,000 food codes to a smaller, more flexible nutrient databank. And to do this, we came up with a standardized approach for this rationalization. And the first step was reviewing foods. In the reviewing exercise, all of the foods that have been available in the nutrient databank for coding between the start of NDNS in 2008 and 2018 were reviewed by two research assistants. Foods were reviewed within a food group, such as all milks in a milk group, and when reviewing, they were considering various factors, but the main factor was the frequency of consumption over the 10 years of NDNS. Other factors were UK public health priorities and the commonly reported recipes, the popularity of specific food brands, the similarity between nutrient composition of similar foods, common ingredients of dishes, and it was the availability of foods in the UK food market. So all foods reviewed were allocated to one of the following categories: retain, meaning required; exclude, not required; or represent, which means that food could be represented by another food. So some of the retained foods were updated, or new codes such as sandwiches were created to allow for a single code to be used to represent a range of similar foods, thereby enabling the reduction of number of food codes overall. This review process has significantly rationalized nutrient data bank. In total, 26% of the foods were decided to be excluded. The 35% of the foods were matched to other foods, which left 39% of foods to be retained in the data bank. So overall, resulting rationalized nutrient data bank contained 2,481 foods, representing an overall reduction of 58% compared to rationalized nutrient data bank. So given the role of NDNS data as an official statistic for UK national nutritional surveillance, it was important to evaluate the impact of changing the dietary assessment methodology in the survey. And this included changes in the underpinning nutrient data bank in order to assess any impact on dietary data and monitoring trends. Therefore, following rationalization, an exercise was undertaken to evaluate the impact of using the rationalized nutrient data bank on NDNS rolling program data compared to use of the former more extensive nutrient data bank. In the evaluation exercise, food codes from NDNS years 2017 to 18, which were originally coded using the extensive nutrient data bank, were matched to food codes available in the rationalized nutrient data bank. So step-by-step single foods, recipes, and sandwiches reported in years 2017 to 18 were replaced with more generic food codes in rationalized nutrient data bank so that we could see the impact of using more concise food list at each step. And finally, original years 2017 and 18 dietary data was compared to data using rationalized nutrient data bank. For example, in single food replacement step, 4 varieties of milk such as summer milk were replaced with one whole milk code in rationalized nutrient data bank, and in recipes replacement step, 85 different varieties of bolognese sauce reported by the previous NDNS respondents were replaced with 4 different varieties of bolognese sauce such as shop bought or homemade bolognese sauce. In sandwiches replacement step, 230 different ham sandwiches reported by NDNS respondents were replaced with 9 different ham sandwiches such as ham sandwich with wholemeal bread. For the evaluation exercise, overall 49% of foods consumed in NDNS years 2017 to 18 were rematched to another food code. 25% were replaced with a generic recipe, a mixed dish code, 20% with single food codes, and 4% were replaced with sandwich food codes. Overall, the difference in the mean daily intake of energy using the extensive and rationalized nutrient data bank was small. We see only 17 kilocalorie increase in mean energy intake. There were greater differences in energy in mixed dishes such as lasagna, compared with single foods such as milk, or sandwiches such as ham sandwich. The differences were similarly low for other nutrients. Estimates of intake for selected foods and nutrients recalculated using the rationalized nutrient data bank were compared to the original intake data using extensive nutrient data bank through pair samples t-tests. Cohen's d effect size was used to examine differences between intake estimates using the extensive and rationalized nutrient data bank. In total, we looked at energy, 24 nutrients, and 3 foods, and presenting a selection of that here. Only small differences in summary estimates for most nutrients and selected foods at population level have been observed. For example, we see 2.8% decrease in free sugars intake, 1.4% increase in folate intake, or 5.7% increase in meat intake. This provides reassurance for continuation of national trend estimates. When nutritional supplements were also included, the differences in mean estimated nutrient intakes were also relatively small. Just to explain visually, this is for example a time trend plot for NDNS population's free sugar intake starting from 2008 to 2020. We see a decline trend in free sugars intake, most probably due to government's sugar reduction policies, and by seeing no difference in estimated nutrient intakes when comparing Rationalized Nutrient Databank to Extensive Nutrient Databank, we see no impact of change in the underpinning nutrient databank on NDNS dietary data and monitoring trends, which is of course very important for UK national nutritional surveillance. When we looked at the association between estimates of energy and nutrients using the Extensive and Rationalized Nutrient Databank, we see a good level of agreement for all the nutrients and foods in relation to the comparison of nutrient and food intake estimates using the two nutrient databank scenarios according to the size of Cohen's k-value being over 0.6, which indicates good agreement. As we see here for energy, free sugars, saturated fat, vitamin B12, folate, vitamin C, meat, fruit and vegetable intake, over 80% of respondents were classified into the same tertile of intake using the Rationalized Nutrient Databank compared to Extensive Nutrient Databank. And this was true for most of the other nutrients that I haven't presented here. Over 8% of respondents were classified into the same categories of nutrient adequacy using Rationalized Nutrient Databank for carbohydrate, free sugar, saturated fat, fruit and vegetable compared to Extensive Nutrient Databank. In overall summary, the use of Rationalized Nutrient Databank has minimal impact on the reporting of NDNS rolling program dietary data. Even with a higher difference in nutrient intake for mixed dishes, their effect on overall dietary intake is not significant. Some 24-hour recalls, of course, use large food databases, including brand databases, so that respondents can find the exact product that they had consumed. However, this comes with its challenges, such as managing long food lists and respondents' fatigue. In another study, Evans et al. Showed a low level of impact on nutrient estimations using a concise food list compared to an extensive food list incorporated into a web-based 24-hour recall, which is called Foodbook 24. And in our evaluation exercise, we see similar results, which is reassuring and adds to the Evans finding and strengthens the evidence of a good agreement between concise food databases and large food databases incorporated into web-based 24-hour recalls. Our study, of course, had some limitations. The evaluation exercise used comparison data from only 1 year of NDNS rolling program, which was a limitation. It was because recipes were more easily identifiable in NDNS years 2017 to 18, and relinking of a large number of foods was largely manual intensive work. Overall, both rationalization and evaluation were a complex and laborious piece of work, which took approximately 2 years' time. So time and staff resources are things to consider carefully in planning this type of work. Food matching was also a rough exercise due to the estimated basis and pragmatic approach. For example, sandwiches were matched based on food name rather than the detailed nutrient profile. This is also the reason that some matching errors were spotted, although their impact should be minimal. Again, although we overall see no significant difference, at product level, we see higher differences in nutrient intake in fortified products such as breakfast cereals or fed spreads. This shows that maybe some food groups, they still need maybe more brand-specific approach or more variety of foods. Therefore, although we now rationalize the nutrient databank and evaluated its impact, data management, quality assessment, and database updates are ongoing processes. This work forms a more concise basis from which to explore improving our food databank management, such as use of brand databases, investigating food resources popular among minority ethnic groups, and exploring the rapidly increasing out-of-home and plant-based foods. It is also an important ongoing work to provide sufficient variety of mixed dishes in future versions of Intake 24 Cambridge. In Intake 24 Cambridge, further optimization of the management of food lists and food composition data and using advanced technologies such as search feature improvement will be considered to offer more food items without compromising on the respondent burden. We are also looking ways to continue assessing the impact of ongoing program of updates on Nutrient Databank using more efficient and quick approaches. This was, of course, a teamwork. I would like to acknowledge my team led by Polly Page in the NIHR BRC Dietary Assessment Platform, the technical team in Cambridge and Open Lab in Newcastle, and Emma Foster, who is our key informant. This work has been supported by UKRI MRC Epidemiology Unit, University of Cambridge, NIHR Cambridge Biomedical Research Centre, Open Lab Newcastle University, UK Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, and UK Food Standard Agency. Thank you so much for listening. This is our webpage, ndns.intake24.org, and please feel free to contact us from our email address. Bye for now.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the program committee and everyone involved in putting together such a dynamic conference, and for providing me the opportunity to present the Food and Nutrient Database for Dietary Studies 2019-2020, an application database for national dietary surveillance. In my presentation today, I'll cover 3 areas. I'll briefly present the purpose of FNDDS, discuss some of the strengths and limitations of FNDDS, and highlight what's new for FNDDS 2019-2020. The FNDDS is an application database created for analyzing dietary intakes from What We Eat in America in Haines. It converts food and beverage portions reported in the survey into gram amounts and determines the nutrient values. Since 2000, What We Eat in America, the dietary component of NHANES, has collected 24-hour recalls on a nationally representative sample of the U.S. population. The 2 24-hour recalls collected provide data on foods and beverages consumed, as well as the time and eating occasion and source of food, or where it was obtained. FNDDS contains food codes and their descriptions, as well as portion weights and nutrient profiles for 65 nutrients. It is also a gateway for additional understanding about reported foods and beverages in What We Eat in America. Now to highlight 3 strengths of the FNDDS. The USDA's Automated Multiple Pass Method, or AMPM, is a 5-step 24-hour dietary recall instrument used to collect recalls in What We Eat in America in Haines. The AMPM and FNDDS are interrelated. FNDDS foods and portions are based on AMPM questions and response options. Updates to both the AMPM and FNDDS are coordinated. The FNDDS can be linked to variables beyond traditional nutrients. The USDA's Food Patterns Equivalence Database, or FPED, is a unique research tool to evaluate food and beverage intake of Americans compared with recommendations of the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. It converts food and beverages in the FNDDS to 37 food pattern components. The What We Eat in America food categories provide an additional application to analyze food and beverages as consumed in the American diet. Information about both can be found on the FSRG website. An important strength of FNDDS is its transparency and public availability. A new version of FNDDS is developed for each 2-year survey cycle and made publicly available on the FSRG website. It is available for download in both SAS and Microsoft Access formats. Click on Documentation Databases from the blue bar on our website to locate both files and documentation. The latest release of the FNDDS is also part of USDA's Food Data Central. FNDDS provides transparent and easy access to the information used to determine the nutrient profiles for foods consumed by respondents in What We Eat in America in Haines. I want to highlight at a glance the blue bar from our website. These 5 files listed in the large green box provide quick viewing and searching in Microsoft Excel format. On Monday, Alana Mashve highlighted the recipe calculation process to determine nutrient composition of FNDDS codes. For each FNDDS code, the ingredient codes, amounts, retention factors, and moisture change are listed in the file FNDDS ingredients. To increase transparency of the development of nutrient profiles, additional information on the source and currency of each ingredient nutrient value obtained from FDC is provided in the file Ingredient Nutrient Values. Let's look at 3 of the limitations of the FNDDS. First, it's important to remember that AMPM and FNDDS are designed for national dietary surveillance of a diverse U.S. population. To limit participant burden and to account for knowledge gaps in respondents' ability to provide specific details about foods, the FNDDS reflects average values for a generic representation of foods and beverages as consumed by the U.S. population. It is not intended to be a reference database of composition values. Second, the continuous nature of NHANES and the resources needed to plan for future cycles while collecting data for present cycles and disseminating data for completed cycles have limited extensive updates. And third, national nutrient intake data are constrained by the completeness and accuracy of the food composition values available. Reference databases include analysis of foods and beverage values that are correct at one point in time. The massive increase in the number of prepared food products available, as well as frequent changes in formulation, have made it impossible to analytically determine the composition of even the most important foods. As FDC continues to develop and Foundation Foods data increase, we will incorporate these values. Now to highlight what's new for FNDDS 2019-2020, which is the 10th release of the database. Our continued focus is on generic codes that reflect likely products as consumed by the U.S. population and on generating nutrient profiles that reflect a variety of items rather than linking to a single SR code. The continued focus is also on standardizing and streamlining the development of nutrient profiles as discussed by Alana Mashve on Monday afternoon. FNDDS 2019-2020 incorporates an increase in the number of ingredient codes. These codes begin with 9999 and are used only as ingredients in recipes. We have also added 6 new ingredient codes for single nutrients plus a B vitamin complex for ready-to-eat cereals. When we look at the numbers, you can see the focus toward generic codes. For 2019-2020, there are 5,624 FNDDS codes, which is 3,000 less than in 15-16. New codes were added for breakfast sandwiches, deli sandwiches, tacos and burritos, and baby toddler foods, and this is just to name a few. The 2019-2020 version incorporates underlying nutrient values from 1,753 SR or SR Legacy, which was retired in 2018. This is 1,000 less than in 1516. We are incorporating nutrient values from Foundation Foods as available. While the number of codes in FNDDS is decreasing, the number of recipes developed is increasing. For 2019-2020, we created or revised recipes for over 1,200 food codes. 70% of FNDDS codes are recipes, therefore not linked to a single FDC code. The best way to describe some of the changes in both codes and nutrient profiles is to highlight 4 pathways of foods: sandwiches, burritos and tacos, baby toddler foods, and ready-to-eat cereals. Beginning with FNDDS 2015-16, the shift began to collecting sandwiches as a single item versus collecting very detailed information about each component and amount, details not known by many respondents. We still collect white versus wheat bread, cheese, yes or no, and any condiments and vegetables that were on the sandwich. We have separate codes for popular deli meat sandwiches obtained from a restaurant versus made at home to account for their different compositions. Tacos, burritos, including burrito bowls, as well as other Mexican items are also collected as a single item. Any additions, such as avocado, sour cream, salsa, lettuce, tomato, are collected as additions. Here are 2 examples of the as ingredient codes that are used in recipes. If a sandwich code contains cheese, the recipe will include the 9999 code displayed in the yellow box, as well as bread and meat. The proportions for the types of cheese are based on a review of frequencies reported as a component of sandwiches from previous cycles of What We Eat in America. The type of cheese used in Mexican items is different, so we developed a new code displayed in the green box. Cheese and queso as ingredient reflects the type of cheese used in a variety of items, from American fast food to authentic Latino items. We also added new codes for beef and for chicken to use as an ingredient in streamlining the process of developing recipes for burritos, tacos, etc. Baby foods highlight the focus of FNDDS towards generic codes with nutrient profiles that represent a variety of items. We still use the appropriate SR legacy codes to generate recipes for baby foods that are single fruits, vegetables, meats, as well as many juices, dry cereals, and baby snack items. The surging demand for baby food products such as purees and pouches and multi-ingredient meals is fueling the growth of the baby food industry. Companies are continuously introducing new varieties and reformulating others. FNDDS 2019-2020 includes generic representations of these multi-ingredient baby foods. As displayed in the white box, there are 84 FNDDS codes that represent all baby toddler foods, which are cereals, juices, snacks, single fruits and vegetables, and mixtures. We developed generic codes such as baby toddler fruit and vegetables, baby toddler vegetables and meat, designed to represent multiple variants of these pouches, jars, and trays. This is a change from 2017-18, see the gray box, where there were 229 FNDDS codes linked to 191 very specific SR codes. Many of these items were not reported since they included exact products such as apple and sweet potato and junior dinner with broccoli and chicken. Now let's look at the new code, baby toddler fruit and vegetables, to understand the recipe process behind this code. Baby toddler fruit and vegetables is 60% fruit and 40% vegetable. The recipe consists of 2 NFS, or not further specified codes. An NFS code is used when a caregiver does not remember what type of fruit the baby ate, but knew it was a jar or pouch of some type of baby fruit. NFS codes are also used as an ingredient in developing other FNDDS codes. Baby toddler fruit consists of 4 types of fruit, and baby toddler vegetable consists of 8 types of vegetable. All are linked to FDC codes that are commercial baby food products, rather than raw or cooked vegetables. The proportions of items are based on frequency reports from What We Eat in America, commercial websites, and published research. As mentioned earlier, if you want to view a recipe in FNDDS, go to the At a Glance Excel file labeled FNDDS Ingredients. These examples are copied directly from that file. The last food group to discuss is ready-to-eat cereals. The changes for FNDDS 2019-2020 represent the most dramatic change incorporated into any of our FNDDSs. For this release, we developed recipes, or nutrient profiles, for each ready-to-eat cereal. In previous releases, cereals were matched directly to an SR code. These codes were from SR 28, and most are not even included in SR Legacy. For FNDDS 1920, we use 14 Food Data Central codes for basic ingredients, 5 types of flour, plus sugar, oil, and salt. Soy protein isolate was added if the protein was too low. We also used several extra items for products that contained raisins, nuts, chocolate, peanut butter, or marshmallows. Then we developed fortification codes and incorporated them to reflect the nutrient profiles of popular cereals. Nutrient codes were developed for dietary fiber, a composite of B vitamins, folic acid, vitamins C and D, and for iron and calcium. The result is 43 FNDDS codes for generic cereals: O's, Crunch, Chocolate Puffs, Cinnamon Toast, Fruit Rings, Fruit Crispy, etc. The FNDDS codes do not necessarily represent one specific brand of cereal. They may incorporate several brands, store brands, or a combination of different varieties. This is a new recipe for cereal O's flavored. There are also codes for O's plain and O's honey nut. The basic ingredients include oats, sugar, salt, and canola oil. Dietary fiber is added, and it is fortified with the B vitamin composite, folic acid, vitamins D and C, as well as iron and calcium. The nutrient profile represents a variety of flavored O-shaped cereals from both major companies as well as store brands. In FNDDS 1718, there were separate codes for Cheerios, Apple Cinnamon, Banana Nut, Frosted, Berry Burst, and Fruity. These were each linked to a separate SR code specific for that flavor, and all had different nutrient profiles. There were also reports for pumpkin spice, blueberry, and peach flavored Cheerios. Formulations have changed since SR 28, and they will continue to change as taste and seasons change, as well as impacts from supply issues. The new FNDDS code for cereal O's flavored does not represent an exact product. However, it reflects the macronutrient and fortification levels of a variety of flavored O-type cereals. In closing, I hope I have increased your understanding of FNDDS 2019-2020 as an application database. It is scheduled to be released in fall of this year. This version was used to determine the nutrient values for dietary intakes collected in What We Eat in America 2019-2020. However, due to COVID-19 pandemic, data collection for the NHANES 1920 cycle was not completed and the collected data are not nationally representative. Therefore, data collected from 2019 to March 2020 are combined with data from the NHANES 17-18 cycle to form a nationally representative sample. NHANES 2017 to March 2020 pre-pandemic. Please sign up for our listserv on the FSRG website to receive notifications of data release. I want to gratefully acknowledge FSRG staff for their contributions in the development of the FNDDS 2019-2020, and I thank you for your attention.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, changed the Nutrition Facts Panel label, and we talked about this a lot in these meetings. But have you wondered what the rest of the U.S. population did during this transition? In this presentation, I am going to share some preliminary results about added sugar. The last several dietary guidelines for Americans have recommended limiting the intake of added sugars. Over the years, the recommendation has gotten more specific, and the current recommendation is limiting the calories from added sugar to less than 10% of total energy intake. To help consumers make better informed decisions, the FDA's new Nutrition Facts Panel, implemented in 2020 and 2021, includes both the total amount of added sugars and the percent of daily value for a 2,000 calorie diet. Our original motivation was to see whether U.S. grocery shoppers changed their added sugar habits during the period leading up to this label change. But while we were conducting our analysis, we found a second motivation. As we know, one of the best sources of dietary intake data in the world is what we eat in America, the dietary component of the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic meant that NHANES had to stop collection in March of 2020, and we do not have dietary recall data to study how individuals in the US did nutritionally. Instead, we are left with anecdotes of excessive amounts of less healthy foods and increased exercise and healthy eating. The good news is that during this period, we do have retail and household food scanner data, and this might provide a mechanism to track what really happened. This led us to 3 research questions. Did added sugar patterns change between 2013 and 2018? Can we profile households who purchased higher and lower levels of added sugars? And can food scanner data be used for additional nutrition monitoring? I'm going to start with a brief summary of results that we have found from NHANES, What We Eat in America. The primary sources identified of added sugars are sugar-sweetened beverages, sweet snacks and candy, coffee and tea drinks, desserts, and breakfast cereals and bars. We've also seen some changes over time. Primarily, we've seen a decrease in added sugar consumption from 2003 to 2012, but the mean intake remains above recommendations. The good news is we have seen an increase in the number of adults who met recommendations from 2007 to 2010 to 2013 to 2016. I am going to present results from 2 different types of data, the retail and household food scanner data, as well as NHANES and What We Eat in America. The proprietary food scanner data available to us at ERS is primarily developed for the industry to conduct market research. At USDA, we use these data for research projects, program evaluations, and regulatory impact analysis, and data products, which consist of both public-facing and internal value-added products. There are 2 types of food scanner data. The first is the retail scanner data we acquire from IRI. These data include weekly item-level sales data for about 60,000 stores for each year. the coverage is about 20% of stores, but 50% of total food sales. This is because these data cover the larger chains within various store types, which include groceries, club stores, supercenters, convenience stores, dollar stores, drugstores, and military commissaries. There is also detailed product information about each product, and this includes the nutrition facts panel for most of the purchased products. The second type of food scanner data is the household data. This is the National Consumer Panel, which is a joint venture between IRI and Nielsen. IRI sells these data as the Consumer Network household data, while Nielsen markets it as the Nielsen Home Scan Panel. In this panel, the households scan their purchases with a phone or a handheld scanner. We get item-level food purchases for roughly 120,000 households and demographic characteristics of each household. Of course, we also have the detailed product information like we did in the retail scanner data. I have mentioned NHANES a few times in this talk, but have not explained it since many of you are likely familiar with it. So to summarize, NHANES, or the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, includes about 5,000 individuals each year. It is released in 2-year cycles and includes a detailed medical exam. The dietary component is what we eat in America and is used for nutrition monitoring. And it consists of 2 24-hour dietary recalls and the nutrition data for the foods as ingested. The nutrition coding is done for what we eat in America is done by my colleagues at the Agricultural Research Service, who compile the FNDDS, and from that the Food Pattern Equivalent Database, or FPED, which contains the amount of added sugar in each food, among other things. Since retail scanner data do not contain nutrition information beyond the nutrition facts panel, it would not be possible for us to use food scanner data to examine added sugar purchases without being able to import the nutrition data from the FNDDS and the FPED. The Purchase to Plate suite combines data sets to enhance research related to the economics of food and nutrition and supports USDA projects such as updating the market baskets for the Thrifty Food Plan and other USDA food plans. Of interest to this study is the Purchase to Plate crosswalk, which allows scanner data users to measure the healthfulness of store purchases, particularly the amount of added sugar purchased. I will be sharing 2 types of results with you today. The first several cover the retail point of sale data, which provide an overview of where added sugar is sold in retail markets in the United States. The second set takes a closer look at results using the household panel. In order to examine differences between added sugar purchases from stores versus added sugar intake, we compared our results to another study that uses What We Eat in America and NHANES 2003 to 2006. In our findings, candy, sugars, and sugary foods are the largest source of added sugar, while soft drinks are second. The reverse is true for NHANES data. There are 2 reasons why we see this difference, as well as different sizes of the share of added sugar purchased. First is it could be that soft drinks are more commonly consumed from food away from home sources. And second, the purchased foods in this first category, candy, sugars, and sugary foods, may become ingredients for foods in other categories of ingested foods, such as cakes, milk-based desserts. 2 others stand out that may be partially related to the passage of time. The first is coffee, tea, and other non-alcoholic beverages are in our top 10 list, but not in NHANES. Perhaps this is because of the increased popularity of these drinks compared to the early 2000s. And finally, yogurt is not in our results, but we identify several studies suggesting that yogurt manufacturers are working to decrease the amount of added sugar. We now turn to potential changes in added sugar purchases within the retail data. Despite the fact that those of us gathered here have been talking about added sugar for several years, the message was really locked in the dietary world. In other words, it does not seem to have made a big difference in terms of reducing the share of total sugar that is added sugar, at least based on store sales data. Since I only have about half of the total retail sales, I am not reporting the total amount of added sugar sold. Between 2015 and 2018, the share seems to be somewhere between 74% and 69% of total sugars. From a dietary perspective, this is not what we want, but it does seem to be what stores are selling. But let's turn to where people are getting added sugar. We start by looking within each store type. What is the share of total sugar that is added sugar? Not surprising, we find that grocery and club stores sell a lower share of added sugar, but dollar stores and convenience stores are higher. In fact, dollar stores sell almost no natural sugar. Liquor stores look particularly low, but that may be because the sugar that they are selling is in the form of fruit juice, which is not considered an added sugar, and added sugars do not include alcohol. When we look at the market share of added sugars across supply channels, we see that most of the added sugar is coming from grocery stores. This is not surprising because according to the ERS Food Expenditure Series, grocery stores have about 60% of retail food sales. The next largest retail channel in the ERS Food Expenditure Series is a combination of warehouse, club stores, supercenters, and mass merchandisers. And the total retail food sales coming from this category is only about 24%, while these channels sell about 31% of the added sugar market. The other three channels tracked by IRI, which sell more than 1% of the added sugar, are drug and convenience stores. Although these channels, along with dollar stores, sell a very small share of the added sugar sold through retail channels, we will see in a few minutes that they do impact household added sugar purchases for households who frequent these types of stores. The final thing to discuss about the 2018 data is where we buy natural sugar. In this chart, I took channels with the largest share of the added sugar market and compared market share of added sugar, total sugars, and natural sugars. For example, grocery stores sell almost 80% of the natural sugar that is sold in retail food stores. This is shown in green. But these grocery stores sell just over 60% of the added sugar, shown in red, and about 65% of the total sugar. In contrast, mass merchandisers, drug and convenience stores have a higher market share of added sugars than total or natural sugar households. These past several slides have looked at the overall retail markets of added, natural, and total sugars. I will now turn to how this market structure impacts different types of households. To understand households, we used a statistical model to observe the relationship between household level added sugar purchases and 4 different factors: household characteristics, geography, household head characteristics, and the household shopping behavior. Since the data represent food at home purchases instead of all food purchases, we examine the household share of total sugar that is added sugar. I will refer to this measure as the share of added sugar. The results I am presenting today use the 2013 data. I also recently realized that we had left out the produce from this analysis. So these results are preliminary, and the share of added sugar is going to be a little bit higher than what we'll see in our final results. I am going to show you 3 charts that look like this one. So let me give you a tour. For those of you who work with regression models, this is simply the coefficients and standard errors. For the rest of you, Let me take a few minutes to explain. On the left-hand side are the factors that we tested. In this case, household size, the average age of the household heads, and so forth. The horizontal axis shows the number of percentage point changes in the added sugar share. The vertical red line represents zero change. And in this slide, the range is between -1 and 1% share of added sugar. The horizontal lines in the white area represent the results. The dots in the middle of the horizontal lines are the point estimates, while the lines represent the standard error. If the horizontal lines is to the right of zero, such as the top factor, household size, it means that the share of added sugar increases, while to the left, as shown by most of the results for households with at least one child under 6, this indicates that the share decreases. If the standard error crosses zero, such as for married household heads, then the result can be interpreted as 0. Each factor has 4 results because we ran our model 4 times, once with the full sample, shown in the blue lines at the top of each group, and once for each of 3 different income groups: households with incomes that are less than 131% of the U.S. federal poverty threshold, shown in red and the second one down, those between 131 and 350% of the poverty threshold, shown in green, the second from the bottom, and above 350% of the poverty threshold, shown in orange at the bottom of each group. Hopefully, I have not confused you too much with this explanation. The first result is that the changes are relatively small and the results by income are not significantly different. As household size increases, the share of added sugar increases. But the second factor, household size squared, indicates that the result is not linear. Households with a male head purchase a higher share, households without a male head purchase a higher share of added sugar, as do most households without children, except for low-income households without children. When examining the age distribution of children, a household can be in more than one category. We see that households with children under 6 generally purchase a lower share of added sugar than the norm, and households with at least one teenager have a higher share of added sugar. Although not shown in this chart, we also found that the summary statistics related to added sugar consumption are similar to those found by Bowman et al. Using NHANES 2013 to 2014. Of all the factors examined in this model, the strongest relationship we found is between the education of the household heads and the share of added sugar purchases. Note that in this case, the scale is from -2 percentage points to 1 percentage point. You can see a steady progression from households where at least one of the heads only has less than a high school degree, all the way to households where at least one head has a postgraduate degree. The other thing that really stands out is that in every case, the low income result is to the left, meaning that they have a lower share of added sugar once we control for education. The final result I want to share with you today is shopping behavior. In particular, we looked at the impact of different retail changes on individual household added sugar share. We measured this by calculating the total number of items purchased at each channel and dividing that by the total number of items purchased. Not surprising, households who purchase a higher percentage of their food items from drug, convenience, and dollar stores have higher added sugar shares. While this impact appears small, this measures the impact of a gradual change in behavior. For every 1% increase in the share of items purchased at dollar stores, the added sugar share increases by about 0.03 percentage points. These results are preliminary, and our next steps include comparing the changes over time in sugar purchases to reported changes in NHANES as part of a larger effort to understand how well food scanner data can be used for nutrition monitoring during the COVID pandemic. We want to repeat the household study with 2018 data to see if there are any changes. We also want to repeat the same measures across time and the household study with added sugar as a share of total calories. And finally, examine changes when the post-label data are available. We have three primary conclusions at this point. First, it is not clear that the share of total sugar that is added sugar changed between 2015 and 2018, but including earlier years may see a difference. Second, grocery stores sell the highest share of both natural and added sugar, but the share of added sugar is lower than most other stores. For added sugar, the most influential household characteristics are education of the household heads and the presence of young children and teenagers. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be discussing with you today an approach that we use to enhance a food and nutrient database to include food unique to Jamaican, Haitian, Nigerian, and Somali cooking traditions in the U.S. I am Lisa Harnack, the director of the University of Minnesota Nutrition Coordinating Center and also a faculty member at the university. In the presentation today, I'm going to provide some background information on why we decided to add foods from these cooking traditions to our database, the approach we used to do so, the results, the products we added, and discuss the limitations of our approach and some conclusions. To start with background, on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd, a Black Minneapolis resident, was murdered by Minneapolis police. His murder was recorded by Darnella Fraser, a 17-year-old who had the wisdom and courage to record this heart-wrenching event and post it for all to witness. This led to a long overdue awakening to racism in policing and and racism in general in our society, and resulting inequities. Many institutions and organizations around the country, and indeed around the world, were called to action. At the University of Minnesota, the action is occurring at all levels of the organization, from the university's president's office to dean's offices across campus, and right down to small units like the Nutrition Coordinating Center. For those of you who don't know, our mission is to support nutrition research and health promotion by providing state-of-the-art software and databases for assessing food and nutrient intake. Our primary activities are developing and supporting nutrition data system for research, a dietary analysis software application for the collection and analysis of 24-hour dietary recalls, and the analysis of food records, menus, and recipes. We develop, maintain, and expand the NCC Food and Nutrient Database, which is a component of NDSR and also can be licensed for other uses. We also provide dietary assessment support services such as dietary recall collection, training on NDSR, etc. So a question we asked ourselves as we looked at what we could be doing more for DEI and anti-racism work is, are we adequately supporting research that addresses nutrition and health inequities? It didn't take much thinking for us to realize that we had work to do in this regard. For example, for a number of years, researchers at the University of Minnesota had asked us to add to NDSR more foods unique to the cooking traditions of Somali Americans residing in Minnesota. Minnesota is home to a large Somali American community, and health inequities are a concern in this vibrant community. Consequently, health and nutrition-related research is being carried out, but this work is slowed if research tools such as NDSR are not designed for use for all. So we embarked on an initiative to expand foods in our database to include those unique to Somali cooking traditions and Jamaican, Haitian, Nigerian cooking traditions as well. In the past, we've undertaken initiatives to add foods unique to a variety of eating traditions. For example, to support the Hispanic Community Health Survey, a major effort was undertaken to add Cuban, Mexican, and Puerto Rican foods to our database. Likewise, a major effort was undertaken to add foods unique to the eating traditions of a variety of Alaskan Native and American Indian nations. But we'd never carried out a major effort focused on the eating traditions of the aforementioned Black immigrant groups. The U.S. is home to Black immigrants who hail from a variety of countries, and you can see from this Pew Research Center table, those who hail from Jamaica, Haiti, and Nigeria represent the largest number of Black immigrants in the U.S. Though the number of Black immigrants from Somalia is smaller than some other countries such as Ethiopia, we decided to prioritize including Somali foods in our initiative in consideration of local needs. It's important to recognize that adding foods unique to various cooking traditions is valuable beyond supporting the dietary assessment of those whose cultural traditions align with these cooking traditions. Those who immigrate to the U.S. bring food traditions that are passed not only to future generations, but also to broader American society. As an example, Minneapolis is home to Pimentos, a wildly popular restaurant that serves Nigerian cuisine. Also, if you came to the National Nutrient Databank conference held in Minneapolis in 2018, you got the opportunity to eat a meal from Afro Deli, a restaurant that specializes in African and Mediterranean themed foods and has a catering service that we used for the meeting. So as we looked at adding foods from these cooking traditions to the NZC database, there's a few considerations that we had to think through. One was, how do we ensure foods that are both commonly consumed and unique to the cooking traditions of those in the immigrant communities are included in the database? Like, which foods do we add? And once we identify which foods to add, how do we identify and determine recipes that best represent the food as consumed in the U.S.? Can we locate reliable nutrient composition information for ingredients that need to be added to the database that are included in these recipes? So our approach, which addressed these issues, a key part of our approach in identifying foods and recipes was hiring individuals who have expertise on the cooking traditions of interest. We are fortunate to be a part of the University of Minnesota, a Big Ten university with over 50,000 students. Among this large student body are students with varied backgrounds, and so we knew we could find individuals with the needed expertise. Between advertising the positions through related student organizations and faculty carrying out research involving these immigrant groups, we quickly recruited and hired well-qualified individuals. Here's our experts, which included individuals with not only expertise on the eating traditions of interest, but also training in nutrition and health fields. We asked our experts to create lists of common foods in different food categories, such as starters, sides, entrees, desserts, beverages, etc. And the experts also identified recipes for these foods that they identified as being commonly consumed. They helped us also prioritize the foods in the event that we couldn't add all the foods. And they also helped us locate product label information for ingredients in foods that we were unsure of what that ingredient actually was, or that sort of thing. So step one was to identify the commonly consumed foods by category. And here we see an example of a portion of the list created by Dr. Alawali for Nigerian American foods. The next to identify typical recipes. And here's an example of a recipe for Nigerian meat pie that Dr. Alawali identified. So for each food that was identified, we started by looking to see if maybe we already had the food in the database or if there was a close matching food. And for the most part, we did not already have the foods in the database, although sometimes we did find a close matching food. And actually, Somali sambusa is an example of that. So I'll show you an example here. Here you see a picture of a Somali sambusa, triangle-shaped pie that's deep fried and has either meat and vegetable filling or just a vegetable filling. So we had something similar in our database called a samosa that has a similar formulation. So you can see here I'm showing a screenshot from NDSR that shows the samosa, and that we've had versions of it available with and without meat. So to figure out if a samosa is similar to the Somali sambosa, we did some research, and here is where you really find out these days the internet is our friend. If you can find reliable sources of information on cooking traditions, it can help you piece some things together. And in this case, we did some digging, and we found that samosas, we learned they are a popular food in the cuisines of South Asia, the Middle East, Central Asia, and East Africa. They have similar formulations or recipes, but they're called different names, including sambusa, samosa, and singara. And so what we did in this instance is we modified the food name so that an interviewer carrying out an interview, if a participant said they had a sambusa, they would know that they should choose a samosa. And we also at the same time then added sambusa and singara, other ways that this food is referred to the food description. We also looked to see if the variable ingredient options for this kind of food, like a samosa, reflected the way that it is consumed by those in Somali cooking tradition. And so in NDSR, for foods that might have different ingredients in constructing a recipe, we have what we call the variable ingredient option. So here you see for the samosa, if someone said they had a meat samosa, they would be asked what kind of meat was in the samosa. And so we reviewed this list to make sure that it had the different types of meat that might be included in a Somali sambosa. So sometimes we found a matching food or a close matching food, but more cases than not, we did not have the food in the database, and so we went about adding it. And so we would use the recipes that were identified by our experts, and in some cases we'd find that the recipe had an ingredient that was not in our database. And here we see an example of jute leaves soup, and we did not have jute leaves in our database. And so in this case, we went about trying to find out if we could get a reliable nutrient composition information for jute leaves. And what we learned was that in the US, more often than not, because fresh jute leaves are not available, so one might buy packaged ground jute leaves, and our expert helped identify an example of a product of this. And in the instance of jute leaves, actually the USDA standard reference has jute leaves in it, so we were able to use in both fresh and cooked form, and so we were able to use USDA data for adding it to our database. So the results. We actually started this work in 2020, and so we added some foods to NDSR 2021, or the 21 version of the NCC database. And at that time, we added goat as a variable ingredient option for curry, which this was a case where the curry in our database was a pretty good match for other curries from other countries, the countries that we're adding here, the eating traditions. But goat was not a variable ingredient option, and the goat would be used as a meat in curry. And I already mentioned the samosa, expanding the naming. We also added fufu made with cassava, fufu made with plantain and cassava, which are Nigerian dishes. And we added sha adays and sha bagays, which are Somali spiced tea drinks. And I'm going to apologize. I'm probably doing some mispronunciations on food names. Here, so in NDSR 2020, which is being released this summer, this is where really the bulk of the new foods are being added to the program in our database. And so here is a list of the Jamaican dishes that are being added. And I show a picture here of Jamaican steamed fish as one of the foods that's added. For the Haitian dishes being added, here you see the list. And then actually I show a picture of the stewed pullet dish. This all looks so delicious. It's probably making you hungry. It's making me hungry. And here is the list of Nigerian foods added. And I'm showing here a picture of Nigerian buns, also known as rock buns. And here's the list of Somali foods added. And I'm showing a picture of Somali halwa, which is a delicious sweet treat. Some limitations with the approach that we used. You know, ideally we would have collected dietary recalls or records and recipes from a sample of individuals in the US who eat in accord with each cooking tradition as an adjunct to use of experts. But due to resource constraints, that was not possible. So we really relied heavily on our experts to identify foods and recipes. The foods in the database that we've added, you know, represent home cooking traditions, how these dishes would be prepared in the home. And restaurants, you know, may choose to make modifications to dishes to appeal to a broader customer base. And these types of modifications may not be reflected in the database. You know, we do have the variable ingredient feature in NDSR for mixed dishes so that, you know, if maybe a different type of meat was used in a restaurant versus what might be used in home preparation, that can be captured because someone would be asked about the meat type when they're asked to describe the dish. Or if, but so this is a limitation. So for some conclusions here, you know, food and nutrient databases should include foods unique to cooking traditions of those who have immigrated to the U.S. And the approach we use, it's a pragmatic approach for doing this. It's key that individuals familiar with the eating traditions of focus should be included as paid collaborators to ensure relevant foods are added using appropriate recipes. I think there could be a temptation to just find people who are familiar with these cooking traditions and, you know, ask them some questions and kind of just think you're going to spend a few hours using, of their volunteering their time to tell you about the eating traditions. It really requires more time than that, and people should be paid for that time that they put into serving as experts for us. And as a wrap up, I'd like to leave you with some homework. Those of us who carry out the work of maintaining food and nutrient databases and dietary assessment tools need to understand the eating traditions of all, and especially those experiencing nutrition and health inequities. So I'd encourage you to look for opportunities to experience the cuisines of Nigeria, Jamaica, Somalia, and Haiti as available in the US. We learned from our experts that recipes authentic to these cuisines are readily available online, so that if you don't have restaurants nearby, it's time to try expanding your cooking skills and trying some new recipes. So bon appetit, and thank you for your time.